of figure to emerge from the interstitial or from oscillating the black stuff of the plan, the structure and so on. This is obviously the diagrams from DAAP in Cincinnati. You know, he sort of developed this later through a kind of borrowing of the idea of the fold, and this worked into the more recent work, the Church of the Year 2000 from a little while back, where again the kind of oscillation of figure and ground, so that basically out of the ideal mathematics of the plan, one could produce the unconscious of the figure, that the dark space in a way would revenge itself. So that Rowe's clarity of figure-ground reversal starts to oscillate to an extent where there is what Eisenman would call a figure plan. And this is the set of diagrams from a project in Galicia, the Cultural Center, and the Cultural Center under construction. So, you know, against the idea of sort of figural plan for free, like Schinkel, or conceptual poche with Corbusier, or what he would call the recent algorithm digital project of the chicken coop, which is to say there's been a total loss of the discipline of the plan, of what he calls composition, and he wants to basically return to composition. And in a way, he's always done that by a kind of archaeology of the plan and oscillation of its structural systems. I have a kind of critique of that, which is that at a certain scale they no longer read, which is why you have a sort of ornamental scaling down of the grid in the soffit and the fixtures and the sort of micro scale elements and assembly systems of the building that start to become an ornamentation of the grid that no longer registers at the scale of the projects that he's doing, unlike the houses. But I think that, you know, we agree with the problem with the chicken coop. It's just that I would say rather than return to composition, that we can turn to the cartoon. And so for me, the Sejma project in Toledo is a version of what I would call the cartoon plan or the diagram plan. And that maybe thinking back to that Las Vegas project, if we could kind of look at all of, you know, the desire to look at all of the casinos, would be that, you know, we could think about a plan that was 100% poche and 100% activity. In a sense, the space is thick with programmed activity, and it's also solid, although differently colored solids. So it's all background. It's both all poche and no poche. But I think you could start to outline a series of traits of, let's call it the cartoon plan, that would be an alternative to Peter's return to composition, and also a rejection of the algorithm no discipline of the plan. So that is the Pechacucha version. What I really wanted to do tonight, what I had planned to do in the version that doesn't yet exist, was to in particular work on the idea of the rounded corner as an element of the cartoon plan, what John calls the fillet corner, what somebody like Stanley Tigerman calls the soft corner, the kind of graphic half-round corner. And I wanted to do it particularly kind of through a genealogy of Chicago, a kind of perverse genealogy of Chicago from the Monadnock building through sort of 30s modern Chicago of Andrew Rabori, the Bauman brothers, through Harry Weiss, even oddly enough, and of course Tigerman himself, even a disciple of Mies, George Shipperwright in Lake Point Tower, and perhaps maybe most especially our friend Bertrand Goldberg. Because I think that in a way that the soft corner or the cartoon corner, the graphic corner, if you will, has a particular territorialization, to borrow from John, and at least I'm trying to invent the possibility of extracting from Chicago's authenticity a kind of counter-genealogy of the cartoon via a certain alternative history of Chicago that might get us back to Sejma and to the Las Vegas interior. But that's for another day. Just to sort of set up the larger project of the cartoon, because I think this is still a prelude for what I want to talk about tonight. One of the things that bothers me, I suppose, about contemporary architecture, both in and outside the academy, is the proliferation of science models. And in a certain sense, you could say that architecture has always had three vectors of understanding: science, politics, and art. Or you could say the discourse of truth, the discourse of justice or the good, and the discourse of the beautiful or even the artificial or fictional. For me, there's been too much in recent years of an idea of architecture analogous to science. And I think it manifests itself in different forms. And I particularly, as you will see, have a problem with all of the truth metaphors. And even people that I think are quite interesting in terms of trying to lay out an optimistic position for architecture today, somebody like Bruce Mau, I think is way too messianic about the possibilities of science and technology. Bruce is our new Bucky Fuller figure, that we're going to solve all the world's problems with science and technology. And I think that I think optimism is good, but I think messianism is a problem. So that kind of fundamentalist, progressivist truth model I have a bit of a difficulty with. And I think what Bruce and others leave out is the issue of politics. So my idea was how we could map out two current tendencies in the academy and in architectural discourse in general, and see if there was a way to set out a third possibility. So if one combination of these three, science, art, and politics, is science and fiction, which I would call digital forms. Another one is politics and science, which you might say is sustainable communities. And so these, I think, are the two dominant discourses in and outside the academy. And my desire was, what about the final possible combination, which is politics and fiction, or what I would call plastic collectives. And so this has really motivated much of the recent work, which is trying to understand a new genre, I suppose, as a position. And it's certainly my personal position in the school. I think it has other members of the faculty circulate around it in their own projects. But it's, one can't exactly brand a school in any particular shape. Believe me, trust me about that. It's not by lack of trying. But the idea of what I call polyphi, so political fiction or many fictions or many fidelities or politan or city fictions or city fidelities. So polyphi became the kind of working idea of a third genre against the dominant two. So if we have the true lies of the digital set, the good truths of the community set, and the good lies of what I'm calling the plastic collectives. Each one has a trope, or a kind of formal trope: the monstrous blobs of science and fiction, the green roofs of politics and science. And I guess my genre, which is really what I'm trying to push here, is the idea of the graphic cartoon as one formal manifestation of what a polyphi would start to look like, or political fiction. Hence the cartoon part. So what next? I guess we already finished there, which is polyphi and graphic cartoons. What next was the title of this conference at IIT that I was recently asked. I'm going to watch my watch because God knows what will happen. A conference at IIT organized by Sean Keller. And the funny thing about this conference at IIT, in a micro-territory way, is that I was asked to be the keynote speaker from UIC. So it was an opportunity I couldn't really pass up. To put the fox in charge of the hen house was good advertising to go back into the Mies school, and basically they wanted to know what was next, what was the future of architecture. So I do what I always do when I'm asked about what the future is, which is I went to the closet and pulled out my magic 8-ball. This is going to be a geography joke in terms of territory. So understand that the request came from